Greetings fellow gorehounds and welcome back to another Blood Splattered vlog. So just yesterday, I watched this movie called Raw, which is a French-Belgian co-production that caused quite a stir in the festival circuit. Basically, much like movies like The Woman or the original Hostel, when this movie first premiered at this one festival, it caused a bunch of people to faint in the theater due to how graphic it was. And even though we get a story like this every other year where a horror movie premieres at a festival and a bunch of really sensitive people overreact, I was still pretty excited to see this movie. Because to be honest, every time I've seen a movie have a reaction like that at the festivals, I ended up really loving the movie when it finally came out. And on top of that, I am a huge fan of French extreme horror, so the fact that another one was being released made me really fucking giddy. And now having finally seen the movie, I can say definitively that Raw is fucking fantastic. It's a coming of age story, but with a really fucked up twist. Because with this story, instead of coming to terms with one's like blossoming sexuality or anything like that, it is instead a girl discovering that she is in fact a cannibal. She craves human flesh the same way a lot of young people crave the sex. But that's not to say that cannibalism is only a stand-in for sex, it's actually a metaphor for quite a lot of things. At certain points in the movie, it's a metaphor for eating disorders, and at some of its most fucked up parts, it's a metaphor for love itself. It's also got this really interesting feminist twist where this girl is essentially taking ownership of her own body by consuming other people's bodies, devouring the flesh of the society that does not accept her for who she is. And in terms of filmmaking style, it's very similar to movies like May, where you're essentially watching this character with these really fucked up aspects about her coming to terms with who she is so she can become a master of two worlds. Except in this case, the two worlds are the normal world and the cannibal world. But even so, all these interpretations I'm throwing out here are all from my first viewing. They're all my surface viewings of the movie. And I have no doubt when I do more research, when I look into what the filmmaker has to say, and when I rewatch the movie over and over again, I will see a whole lot more to it. But even with just my surface interpretations, there is a whole lot to chew on with this movie. And I loved every goddamn second of it. This movie has fantastic performances, it's shot very methodically, and you should pay attention to everything on screen because it will become important later on. And there were some times where I was sitting there watching this movie and I legitimately had to look away from the screen because it was so fucking unsettling. And this is coming from a guy like me that loves body horror films, and I was sitting there watching this movie going like, oh geez, that's just fucking gross. But in like the best way possible. I loved it. And goddamn, it's been a long time since I had to look away while I was watching a movie. That's a pretty good sign. And so yeah, I think I might have exhausted everything I can say before we move on to the spoilers. This is a fantastic horror film. It's another entry in the French extremity genre. It's definitely a movie that's gonna be a huge contender for my end of the year list. You can bet on that. And like I said, I just loved it. I don't even have anything to complain about. Anyway, my fellow gorehounds, if you would like to watch Raw for yourself, and I highly recommend that you fucking do, then be sure to click the Amazon affiliate link that I will include below, because that is actually how I ended up watching this movie. And if you click that Amazon affiliate link and watch the movie through that link, I will get a kickback from it. And with all that said, my fellow gorehounds, let us move on to the spoilers. Alrighty then, so there's a lot of stuff that happens at the beginning of this movie that become incredibly important later on, so you really need to pay attention. For example, there's this prologue that happens before the main movie starts that seems to be completely disconnected from everything that happens until way later on. And what happens in this prologue is we see this random stranger on this road and she decides to hide behind this tree, and then when a car comes by, she runs out in front of the car and causes the car to crash. We get the blaring honking of the horn, the smacking into a tree, and then credits. And if you're anything like me, you're gonna be sitting there when this scene happens going, what the fuck does this have to do with cannibalism? I thought this was a cannibalism movie, not Crash. And so from there, we're introduced to our main character, Justine. And it's very obvious that what's happening with Justine right now is that her parents are taking her to her first year of college. But before they make it to the college, they stop at this diner and they have dinner. And during this dinner, it's established that Justine was raised as a hardcore vegetarian. And the way we learn this is because she almost throws up because hidden within her mashed potatoes is a piece of meat. And her mom freaks the fuck out and she's fucking offended and goes off to like yell at the chef or something. So this family is fucking serious about its vegetarianism. After this scene, they drop her off at her school where she finds her dorm and meets her gay roommate. But their introduction is short-lived when a whole bunch of elder students in ski masks come running in and pull them out of their dorms. And then they're led single file down this hallway through these corridors and into this secret party. But our main character Justine is extremely uncomfortable with this because it's very obvious she's been sheltered her whole life. She was the super nervous overachiever who always got straight A's and always followed the rules, and now here she is breaking the rules at the behest of her elders, but what should she do? So she is super freaked out until she runs into her sister, Alexia. And it's very obvious that unlike her sister, Alexia is way more of a troublemaker. And over the course of this movie, she kind of serves the double role as her mentor as well as her antagonist. So Alexia tries to get her to get more comfortable with the party and then leads her into this other room where she shows her all these photographs of all the old classes. And in one of the classes, she sees among the students is her mom, which establishes that her mom, despite being this like nervous control freak much like herself, she went through this school as well and through all the same hazing rituals. And then the next thing the first year students are forced to do is to eat this raw animal kidney, which got me wondering why the fuck would this super vegetarian woman raise her children to be vegetarians? Because the mom had to eat the kidney, the mom had to have the blood covered in her, so why would she force her daughters to go through this? And if they did go through this, why would she be so hardcore about her vegetarianism? You know, I don't even know if vegetarianism is a word, but I'm gonna keep using it because fuck it. But anyway, all these questions that I am asking right here, you as the audience are supposed to ask, and trust me, there are answers. So Justine refuses to eat the kidney, but then her sister forces it down her throat, which makes her throw up. But throwing up is not the only consequence of eating this kidney. It also causes two other things to happen. Number one, she starts developing this hardcore itchy rash all over all of her body. And number two, she starts developing a craving for meat. And this movie has this great metaphor for what she's going through over the course of the movie. Because what she's going through is akin to when a dog first bites a person and then has to be put down because now it has tasted flesh and it might have liked the taste, which would cause it to bite other people. Which is actually a subplot that happens in this movie, but I'll get to that in a minute. So she goes to this school nurse who gives her this skin cream for her condition and says that she has food poisoning, and then gives her this really great speech about wanting to fit in with all the people and how that's not necessarily a good thing. And what I love about this speech is that it very much highlights what this movie's actually about outside of the physical aspect of cannibalism. Because at the end of the day, this is all about finding your true self and being who you are despite all of society's expectations of you. Because fuck those expectations, you need to figure out who you are. So she tells her gay roommate that she wants to try eating meat now, so he takes her to this gas station where they get shawarma, and they have this really creepy and unsettling interaction with this one truck driver. He starts getting uncomfortably touchy with the gay guy, who is definitely not comfortable with it at all, and then starts talking about how humans and pigs are very similar genetically and that eating pork is not that different from eating human flesh. And you can definitely tell from this conversation that it sparks some sort of idea in this girl. Anyway, she goes to school the next day and then gets yelled at by the elder students because the elder students declare that it is nightclub day and that everyone should be dressing in sexy, skimpy outfits. But this girl doesn't have any outfits like that, so she goes to her sister for help. And it's very obvious that as much as her sister loves her, she's really annoyed with her naivete. So she starts taking her out and bonding with her. And while this is all happening, she discovers that her sister has very similar skin cream in her apartment. Which means that whatever skin condition that she has that was triggered by eating that raw meat, her sister has it too. And then the next thing that happens is when the movie really starts to get fucked up. Because Alexia decides that Justine, if she wants to start picking up guys, needs to wax her pussy. So she starts waxing her sister's pussy, and this is when things go really wrong. Because it gets stuck and starts tearing her skin, so she grabs these scissors to try to cut it off, but then her sister kicks her in her face, and she ends up accidentally cutting off her finger. So Alexia passes out upon seeing her finger missing, and Justine gets up to help her and starts freaking out, but then she sees her sister's finger on the floor. She gets this strange craving, she picks it up, and then she starts eating it. And this was the first point in the movie where I had to look the fuck away because this just got super gross. And it helped that I was so invested in these sisters and their relationship that her eating her sister's finger, oh my god, that hurt. Like, it hurt on like an emotional level to see it happen. But also, like, the sound design of her chewing on the finger, oh jeez, it fucking makes my skin crawl. So then Alexia wakes up and sees her sister eating her finger, and while she looks unsettled by it, she doesn't look freaked out, which is very interesting. Because if it were me and I saw my brother eating my finger, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? We then cut to the hospital and she's all bandaged up at this point, and then her parents ask what happened and she says that her dog ate her finger. So the dog is put down, and when the dog is put down, that's when we have this conversation about dogs eating flesh. But then Alexia tells Justine that they need to talk and then lures her to this road where we find out that she's the one that caused the car crash in the prologue. And then Justine freaks out the way Alexia should have earlier, like, what the fuck are you doing, sister? You just killed these people. But then Alexia gets up, walks over to the cart, and starts eating from the flesh of the victims. Because it turns out she has the same cannibalism urge, and the way she found to cope with it is to cause these car crashes and to eat the victims. And this is when it becomes obvious that Alexia isn't just Justine's mentor / antagonist. She is also the dark shadow of who Justine could be. She is at a fork in the road of her life, and at one end there is the possible direction of Alexia, and at the other end there is the complete and utter unknown. So after this scene, she disconnects from her sister and starts going off on her own. And she has this one scene where she goes to this party and then she's thrown into this room and supposed to make out with this dude. But when they start to make out, she ends up biting his lip off. Because it turns out not only is her hunger linked to her cannibalism, so too is her sexuality, which becomes a huge issue as she becomes attracted to her roommate. And if you've been paying close attention, you might be wondering, hey, her roommate is gay. How is that supposed to work between the two of them? Well, I'm glad you asked, because actually this is another subplot in the movie that I actually really like. Because while all of this is going on with Justine and Alexia, it turns out her roommate is going through a similar issue. Except in his case, he is discovering that he might actually be bisexual, not gay. But not only has he defined himself as gay and his entire worldview is based around the fact that he is gay, it's also what he's expected to be at this point, so how could he now all of a sudden be bisexual? So he has his own master of two worlds thing going on where he's got to figure out how to balance this. And these two stories end up colliding when Justine and the roommate end up having sex. And this is one of the most awkward sex scenes I've ever seen because you have the formerly gay guy who's not quite comfortable touching women yet, and you have this girl who can't seem to have sex without wanting to eat the person she's having sex with. But in the end, they end up reaching a climax and she ends up biting her own arm so she doesn't hurt him. But after this sex scene, they have a huge falling out because he is like, I can't be fucking having sex with women, I'm supposed to be gay. But on top of that, it turns out Alexia might be attracted to her roommate too, so Justine and Alexia are back at odds with one another. And I'm not going to tell you exactly how this all culminates, but I will say that there is at one point a fight between the two sisters where they're literally eating each other as they fight, and it's super fucked up. And I just fucking love it because it's obvious when they're eating each other, they actually kind of love each other even though they're trying to kill each other. It just, like, all the fucking emotions in this fight scene. But before we end this vlog, I do want to talk about the final twist of this movie. So if you do not want to have the final part of this movie spoiled for you, then stop watching right now because this final twist answers all of the movie's earlier questions. Alright, you ready for this? Here we go. So the very last scene of the movie, after everything has happened and some people have gone to jail and some people are fucking dead, Justine and her father are talking to one another and her father ends up taking off his shirt and revealing all these bite marks under his shirt. Because it turns out it is not her or her sister's fault what happened over the course of the movie, they actually inherited it. And the reason why their mom was so hardcore vegetarian and freaked out when her daughter was eating meat was because she is a cannibal. And she's been fighting it her whole fucking life, and the reason why she sent her daughters to the same school was because her experience going to the school is what taught her how to deal with it. So she wanted her daughters to have the same education. And so all of a sudden, all the earlier questions are finally answered in this moment, in this one glorious moment that's actually treated like a punchline. And that's another thing I actually forgot to mention in the non-spoiler section. This movie's actually really darkly humorous. Anyway, my fellow gorehounds, I fucking love Raw, and I've kind of exhausted everything I can say about the movie. So as per usual, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so that you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And as I always say, my fellow gorehounds, peace out, and I'll catch y'all later. Brought to you in part by a generous donation by the Center for Unease Control.